is up, sexy people of the internet? It is Dave, it is Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Indianapolis, Sludge Degenerates, Kiritsis.
Please tell me that that's in the press statement and you're just not throwing shade from a long distance away. They're never getting to Scotland. They can't even find Scotland on a fucking map.
The band's new album, new self-titled album, will be released on April 4th via Wise Blood Records. Freshly formed in 2024, Kiritsis blend doom and hardcore.
That was last year.
And hardcore into a bruising and groove-laden uppercut of sound. From the first roar to the final uppercut, this debut is a brawl of crushing riffs and defiant rage. These songs are sledgehammers of rebellion and bare-knuckled dissent. While the band is new, the members have left an imprint on the Indianapolis hardcore and metal scenes with current former bands Trenches, Sundown, Hate Song and more. Entrenched in the pound tradition of Midwest and Rust Belt hardcore, Kiritsis have created one of the heaviest debuts of 2025. The album was recorded by Wesley Heaton at Cameron Lockwood at Holy Ground Productions, then mixed
inside Cameron Lockwood. Hauled him out, put a mixing desk in there and said, give it your best, lads. Here we go.
Album was then mixed and mastered by Wesley Heaton. The debut album from Sludge Quartet, Kiritsis. Right, a wee bit of backstory here. When I saw the band name, I was like, that is quite unique. Like, I was like, how do you even pronounce that? I was like totally sure. Let's Google Kiritsis and see if there's any reference. Does it mean something? And all that came up was this story about a guy called Anthony George Kiritsis, or Tony Kiritsis, who was from Indianapolis. I was like, all right, okay, right. So this is a guy who famously wired a shotgun to a mortgage broker's head and paraded him up and down the streets of downtown Indianapolis.
Yes.
So when I read that, I was like, this is starting to ring a bell here, this story. So basically the story had said, after failing to keep up payments on a piece of real estate, which the mortgage broker refused to give him additional time to pay, it was then believed that the mortgage broker and his father wanted the property because it had increased in value and could be sold at a high profit. So they basically told him it was too late to make the payment, so they could try and get it from themselves. And then this was then later made into a documentary in 2018. And I think this is maybe where I've kind of heard about it. It's been made into a film called Dead Man's Wire, which is going to be directed by Gus Van Sant and stars Bill Skarsgård, Al Pacino, and Coleman Domingo, I think, as well. So I was like, okay, right. Now, at this point, I've no idea if this band are named after Tony Kiritsis.
They're from Indianapolis, though.
Yeah.
It seems like a little bit of a coinky-dink, Dave.
It does. And then, just to jump into the album slightly, the sample at the beginning of the album is, I'm pretty sure, Tony Kiritsis. So
he was the precursor to Luigi Maglione, the guy that just done away with that health. Was it earlier on this year, and has one of the most fantastic unibrows in the world. I'm just going to put it out there, and shag him.
Plus,
and there's more.
Well, this album is very much built on the feeling of rage. So I feel like it would fit with a story about a guy, with a gun on the edge of just losing his shit. So I feel like, it is all kind of connected together here. I heard one single from this, a track called Pissant was the track that I heard.
Yeah, third track, yeah.
And I was like, what a great name for a song. However, the riff on that track just about fucking ended me.
Yeah.
I need to talk about riffs for a second here, Duncan, because, right, so some sludge bands are very good at writing the standard kind of big, thick, hefty sludge riffs, which is great. I love that shit. Give me it all. I love it. And then there's bands that can do that, but then they make these riffs just highly memorable. And Kiritsis are fucking awesome at that. there are so many riffs on this that I was like singing or humming in my head after I played the album, and that doesn't happen often with albums of this style. If I had to put this band in the same bracket as another, it would 100% be Crowbar.
Yeah.
Crowbar are one of those bands. They have the iconic riffage that as soon as you hear it, you're like, I know that band and I know that song. You know what I mean? You'll hear it go, oh, that's Planets Collide, or fucking that's like Broken Glass, or Existence is Punishment, whatever. I could go on. But those tracks have riffs that will just like live forever. In my head, anyway, they will. But I feel like
a really good example on this album is the small things they do in a riff. So like when you get to It Ain't Easy, the opening riff goes bow 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 bow, right? That right. It plays for 4.
Yeah.
On one of the measures, I think it's in the third measure, for one beat, it bends the string.
Yeah.
So it goes bow, 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 da da da, bow, 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 da da da, bow, 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 da da da. Once.
Yes.
And they do it like the, and it's just a wee thing, but when you're already got that and you hear that, you go, oh fuck!
Yeah.
Like, it just it gives added stank. Like your face, like it's like your stank face has a stroke, so slightly slops a little bit more to the side, like a case of Bell's palsy mid stank. And it's the album is fucking full of that, of these, just like you're already listening to a riff that's fucking awesome, right? Awesomely heavy and punishing, and then they just add a wee bit of seasoning on it, just like a little bit of sizzle on that steak, Dave, and all of a sudden I'm a happy boy.
Yeah, for sure. Like I feel like they are on that same kind of path where, like as you said, each track has a moment that will stop you in your tracks, and you just appreciate just how fucking killer the riff is. And they're very good at building a song around a colossal riff. But the good thing about Kiritsis is the stuff that surrounds that fucking amazing riff isn't like mediocre. Like the quality is always there regardless of what they're doing. And I think like even these guys sit within the sludge genre. I quite like the fact that most of this isn't a kind of predictable sludge tempo. It doesn't stick within that same kind of BPM for the entire album, and it's in those moments where I felt like I started to get like other kind of influences coming through. There's a bit of like High on Fire in the kind of faster material on Like the Taste, track 5, very much in that vein. And then they do get a bit slower and a bit kind of almost kind of down-esque in some moments of the album as well, more kind of like early down than newer down, a little bit kind of Nola at times. Then there's moments where they take a turn down a more kind of like sinister alley, where they bring in a bit of kind of clean guitar, like on the in Easy, which adds this almost kind of like melancholy kind of atmosphere to the mood, but it perfectly pairs up with the dissonance in the riff that follows it. Never Coming Home probably leans into that kind of darkness the most. It's very kind of haunting and deliberately slow in its build up. I think there might even be some kind of synths or kind of organ in there, maybe just guitars with effects on it. I'm not entirely sure, but even though they kind of transition it into the main riff, which is awesome, they don't just kind of abandon it either. There's something that it comes back later to keep that track kind of darker in mood throughout, and then it finishes on an absolute kind of head splitter of a riff. The closing track, Deny, Defend, Dispose, is probably the one track that feels a little bit more experimental. The verses are a little bit more kind of noise rock driven. There's a bit more kind of lead work in the background, which eventually does build into the Kiritsis philosophy of this next riff shall fucking end you. But I like that they kept me kind of guessing to the end, even though these guys have like a kind of blueprint. They aren't afraid to kind of step outside of that and push the boundaries a little bit. And they're clever with it. Like they never overdo it with experimentation, so that, you know, it never feels like disconnected because of that. To what they've done like elsewhere on the album. It's just little small doses of things that they add in. Like even in the lead work, it's not overused. The first half of the album actually doesn't really have any kind of lead work at all. It's not until Thieves and Fools where they start to kind of feed it in, and you get that big kind of like Crowbar-esque kind of solo at the end. Vocally as well, like the vocal is just pretty visceral for the most part. Bake has this real kind of gutsy kind of bark to his voice. He just kind of snarls all the way through this, but it perfectly fits with the music. But you can also hear on It Ain't Easy that he does have another gear. Like you can hear some more kind of subtle, kind of tonal kind of melody coming through on it. But again, they don't overdo it at all. So as an album, I really enjoyed this. I thought this was like killer stuff. The riffs are excellent on this album. The album just kind of flows right through, but they give you little variances in speed and rhythm right throughout the album. My only kind of criticism to the album, the part where I did have a little bit of issue, was in the production of it. I feel like there's a part of the production that captures a lot of what you'd want. It has that kind of like real sludgy character. It's thick and it's meaty. But I did feel like I felt it was a little bit lacking in the mids a little bit. It felt like there was a little bit of clarity needed more in the kind of mid-range. And then in the top end, it was a little bit kind of too kind of tinny and a little bit hissy sounding for me. I found that a little bit distracting as the album went on. Overall, I think I can still listen to the album and still really enjoy it. It didn't like put me off or anything like that, but it was something that I was aware of. It was in the kind of back of my head. It still hits with a decent impact, but there was just a few little things in the production that maybe just were lacking or had too much of. For a debut though, I feel this is very well done. Like this is a band that are like a year in their, maybe not even a year in their career. And it's not, for a debut, it's not a like typical kind of like, here's every idea we've been storing for the last 5 years of being a band or whatever. It's much more controlled than that. They haven't overstuffed this to the point where it feels like messy or chaotic. They know their strengths and they've focused on that for this debut. The riffs are their strength. The riffs are fucking killer on this. The guitar work is just excellent. Plus my score will reflect the fact that this album does have a cowbell on it. What about yourself? What did you think of this?
There's an episode of Rick and Morty where Rick is trapped in some like fucking mind-breaking machine and he's being questioned, and he looks at someone and he realizes he's in a hologram. But I turn around and asking, I think it's his son-in-law, to bend over and fold himself into a pretzel exactly 12 times, and he can only do 10, I think it is. But the sound of him like compressing and compacting himself while the bone contortions and crunching is kind of the sound of this album. It is just fucking gnarly. It's really, really, really gnarly. The heft on this is hard to understate. Like the riffs are fucking gargantuan. Just monstrous sounding. And like every time you think you found your new favorite riff on the album, you then get the next song and it changes. And that's kind of how I felt throughout the listen. I've fucking flip-flopped on my favorite riff on this album God knows how many times. I don't even know if I've now reverted back to what was my favorite riff on the album to begin with. It's just so fucking well written. I also love the fact that it's just over half an hour long, which is perfect length for an album like this and for a debut. Like you mentioned, it's a debut, they haven't overstuffed it, but at the same time all the songs have personality. Like they all kind of stand on their own laurels, and that's that memorable quality you mentioned about the riffs as well. But they do mix up tempos, so some songs do start a little bit slower, some hit you with mid-pace, some start off a bit quicker. Some tracks don't have any lead work, others have lead work, so they went out of the way to give those songs character. That might sound like a relatively banal thing to compliment a band on, but I think you're right. I think sometimes when bands get signed, their first album tends to be every idea, whether or not it's an idea that flows. And sometimes you can get ideas that are very similar on tracks side by side, because the intro riff's at a different pace, or he's singing instead of screaming, but the rest of the track sounds relatively familiar.
Yeah.
None of this sounded familiar to the track before, out with their overall tone. It's an album that like just generally fucking hits you and continues to hit you with a kind of level of savagery, which is just really welcome. I love the vocals on this. The vocals have a great production that make them... It's kind of bit of locked in a cupboard reverb sort of sound about them, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And perfect for what they sound like. Like, they're not the prominent factor of what you hear. The prominent factor of what you hear is the guitars. And rightly so. They are fucking huge. But the vocals are just like this other, like, hoofed behind it. Drum-wise, I think the drums are really, really punchy. I think you've hit the nail on the head as my biggest issue. We very seldom speak about our views on the albums before we hit record. The fun of it is kind of finding out where we both land on things and how eerily similar, or how at times we can be on completely other ends of the spectrum. And I asked you before we hit record just to confirm that it wasn't just my headphones, but I did have some issues with the production, to which you have kind of articulately summarised and your side of the thing. But I found it a bit tinny in places, particularly on the cymbals and the hi-hat, where I would like something that is very kind of bass, drum, snare and tom heavy, which is fine for music like this, but I want the impact of those crash cymbals, and I want a bit of hi-hat where it doesn't sound like the frequencies have been fucked with too much. Now, it's their first album. They've only been a band for under a year, and I imagine that as soon as they've got their songs ready, they want to get something out. You know what? I can't blame them for that. But it does make me wonder, with a little bit more time on the mixing, mastering of this, how this could have sounded. I think it could sound a little bit more impactful with that. But also kind of makes me think the next one's going to sound bigger, which is only going to make me happier. Yeah. But yeah, as a debut, this is fucking awesome. Yeah. Like, there's no way you can be unhappy and call yourself a metal fan with anything really on this in terms of songwriting.
Yeah.
That it ticks if ever there was a band that ticked the Sludge brief, this is it. This is like Sludge through and through in the best possible way. I'm glad you mentioned that they come from a hardcore background, because there are moments, little glimmers of something really kind of hardcore front, that pop through, but it's picked at appropriate times and for impact, as opposed for writing a song around it. So I think all that really works. Like a very, very, very impressive debut.
Yeah. Well, there's they don't sound identical to this band, but they remind me a little bit of like Arm for Apocalypse.
Yeah.
They've got that kind of same kind of like balance between things, where they've got slow songs, they've got faster songs, but the riffs just always just absolutely annihilate you.
They could totally open for Arm for Apocalypse. That'd be a fucking great shout for them. It'd also be like people would be bleeding from every orifice as well. It sounds like an unnecessarily heavy gig. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. Final thing. Scores for Kiritsis and their debut self-titled album. I can't deny how good the guitars are on this. Like, the riffs just make this for me. So many memorable moments in the riffs and the guitar work. I loved it. Vocally, it's great. Grooves are fucking awesome. There's a lot of nice variation in the album as well. Yeah, production a little bit brings it down slightly. Just a few little things need tweaked there. But I'm going to bring that score back up with that wee bit of cowbell. So let's say 4 out of 5 for me on this one. What are you thinking?
I'm right with you, 4. The cowbell, I'm not giving it extra marks for cowbell.
Oh, come on.
Every American band should have a cowbell. Should be the national fucking instrument. It should be on the fucking flag, as far as I'm concerned. And every band that doesn't have a cowbell should be marked fucking down. It's a 4. It's
they
great.
Should play
great.
The national anthem on the cowbell.
Imagine how bad that would be. Oh man.
Awesome. Kiritsis and their debut self-titled album out on April 4th on Wise Blood Records. Links below at the band, their Bandcamp, one of the singles. Check out. I'll link in Pissant because it's fucking awesome. Check it out, have a listen, see what you think. Let us know. That is a review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye everyone.